Naira swap and the Supreme Court judgment. That's the topic we are exploring this morning. And of course, I'm not alone in the studio this morning. My colleague is seated right here with me. Good morning, Najula. How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing fine. It's always a pleasure to be here. You understand? Sitting next to Amiable Chidimwa. Well, this morning we'll be talking about Naira swap and the CBN. And we have our discussants that will be biting into this topic because I'm sure this is something everybody out there will be keen to really know what the federal government has to, to do with this issue of Naira swap, two currencies in circulation simultaneously. Well, I'm not a Naira expert. I believe I will leave that to the discussants.
It's all right. And our discussant this morning, Chukwunonso Ekesiobi. Chukwunonso Ekesiobi is a lecturer, Department of Economics, Chukwemeka Odumegwu University. You're welcome to the program.
Thank you.
And we also have with us this morning Ichie Mike Odumodu. He's a financial expert and active citizen. Good to have you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, listeners.
I know you like that part of active citizen, right?
Yeah, very active.
very active.
Very active.
As you can see, I'm blessed among men this morning, so I have to choose from. okay. All right, I'm glad to have you both on the show this morning. Talking about Naira swap and the Supreme Court judgment. It seems that we've been moving around the circles since this redesign and all that. Now, we talked about the president addressed the nation some time ago, telling us that it's only the 200 Naira notes that will be in circulation till 10th of April. And now Supreme Court has given judgment after the election that all the notes, but 200, 500, and 1,000 will still be in circulation. That still remain its status of legal tender till 31st of December this year. And up until now, the CBN are silent, the federal government, they are silent too. So,
well, post the election mood, the general feeling is still that of silence, but this kind of silence we can refer to it as a graveyard silence. We are silent, but we have a lot of things on our minds, and the Naira swap issue should not be part of the main talking points we have in the very delicate situation like we have now, as with the electoral process and the election season. But like you rightly pointed out, this Naira swap issue we have been discussing around it, trying to make sense of what has become a very confusionist situation. Why is that so? Because yes, the central bank sometime last year came up with this idea of having a policy of I think the objectives were one, to control the volume of money outside the financial system, running into over 2 trillion or so. And another thing, by controlling those monies, trying to bring in those monies within the financial system, the central bank was basically trying to have more control of its monetary policy functions. And again, to curb inflation and to promote financial inclusion, because they wanted everything back within the financial system. So people with about 35 to 40% of our population outside the banking system, they try to see how we can use this policy to cut down on the unbanked population that we have. Then other objectives that I felt were not economic in nature, like trying to curb vote buying and kidnappers and all those. Those were not the primary responsibilities of the central bank. So given like 100 days before the deadline, I felt that, my own opinion, I felt that date was sufficient. But somewhere along the line, Nigeria happened to the policy, and like with most other policy issues we've been having, the deadline was extended, and somewhere along the line we heard that some governors took the case to court, and from going to court, the in-between when the central bank, the Supreme Court rather, gave an order that we should maintain status quo until it looks at the substantive matter. So that interim order, within that period, I'm not a lawyer, but the little I know is that when the case is in court, everybody should be at a standstill pending the determination of the case itself. But the president came up again with an address, like you pointed out, saying that, okay, while 1,500 continue to be null and void in terms of ceasing to be a legal tender, that we are to recirculate the 200 naira. So, that's now further added to the confusion. Are we obeying the Supreme Court? Or are we obeying the president? Because based on the presidential address, the central bank was swift to move into action and to implement. So you see this who is doing the proper oversight in this whole thing. So now that the judgment is out, it begs us to kind of interrogate, for instance, the objective, the actual objective of the purpose, the policy, and if these objectives have been defeated with the Supreme Court judgment. So, but for me, if I was to analyze from my own understanding, I feel that there is a reason why central banks, globally, it is standard practice that central banks should be independent. And nobody is saying, the independence does not, yes, it can be independence in theory, but at least you should assume some level of independence to avoid this kind of interference, confusion, and the rest from, these external influences. So Nigeria trying to, or going ahead in the CBN Act to give it that level of independence, especially as concerns monetary policy issues, is not out of place. So I find it troubling that we now challenge the decisions of the central bank.
The policy is not favorable. Can't they be challenged?
It is a policy issue and not a legal issue. You don't treat policy issues with judicial orders or judicial matters like that. Since it's a policy issue from a body that is statutorily and legally given with that responsibility to handle monetary policy, it should not be something that should be going to the Supreme Court. Rather, you can have the National Assembly call those MDAs or whatever and, make some inquiries, make some interrogations here and there. But it doesn't mean that it's for every, because what has happened now is a wrong precedent. Because it then means that whatever the CBN does now, you can take them to court.
Well, I can remember that the National Assembly invited the CBN governor, but he failed to
eventually he showed up. Eventually he showed up.
Yes.
There are some instances, didn't they invite EFCC boss, even the court and the rest of them? Many people, we have seen instances where these people, disregard invitation, summons, or even court process. So, for me, that we have set a wrong precedence because the monetary policy of the country is a technical issue. And with all due respect to the justices of the Supreme Court, they are lawyers, they are not monetary policy experts. So if we begin to dissect this thing properly, you will see that what they have done is to go beyond, from you, where their powers lie. Because the central bank has acted on the powers vested in it. Because the Central Bank Act did not say when you want to introduce a new currency, for instance, that you should go to the state governors, because the state governors were the ones who actually took this thing to the court.
Okay, so will it be right to say, Iche, that now CBN didn't do their homework well before coming out with this monetary policy? Yeah, it's their statutory responsibility to come up with this kind of policy, but we have been moving around in circles all this while since the redesign of Naira. So does it mean that they didn't, evaluate the policy very well before coming up with it?
Thank you very much. And the answer is exactly, they didn't do their homework very well. I want to start by reminding us that we talked about this issue when it was in its formatory stage. You were here. Yeah. And I said so many things about it. I said, look, this project is not going to work because the time is short. And when you are doing so many things, you will present the data. You will tell people, this is what I'm doing. For like the central bank, it has to tell Nigerians, I am doing this, I am printing money. This is how much I am going to print. This is the way it's going to be. I said all these things before they start to it's going to end in this deadline and all that. And I said, because they have not given us what they are telling, they have not told us what they were doing, I said they will fail. Because to print money, many nations and many central banks, they use it to do so many funny things. Sometimes they print money and cut the money away and give you the much they want to give you. So it is even this swapping. Most of the swapping is done in central bank. Ask Benicio, if you want to pick money as a corporate body, as an individual, you could get to the central bank, you will be introduced, and you bring your money in, maybe the money, maybe old notes, and they will give you new notes within the central bank. They do it. So the swapping, everything is done by central bank. So originally central bank made a mistake for not telling us this is how much we are going to redesign. And I said it. Now that they have done the redesigning, the money they put in circulation wasn't enough. And they were, beating about the bush, telling us we have given commercial banks this amount. You go to because I did my own investigation on some banks. I asked them, how much have central bank given you? Some branches of a bank will say, since the inception, we've received only 3 million of the new Naira notes. Where is it going to? Some of the big branches said they got only 30 million, from inception. And if you look at all these things they're talking about, if you are loading an ATM with 1,000 Naira note, a normal ATM will take 12 million. If you are loading 500 Naira, a normal ATM will take 5 million. And if you are loading to 200 Naira, it will take about 2-point-something million. So it is as that's the position of ATM. And if you give somebody 3 million, it's only going to load one ATM. And that money will finish within 1 hour or two, depending on the location of the ATM machine. So what the CBN did was totally planlessness. They didn't plan well. They didn't tell people what they were doing. CBN didn't consult. All these things. Sometimes we say it's like INEC. INEC is Independent National Electoral Commission. How independent are they? In the real sense, before you do something, there are institutions that must be consulted. For instance, the CBN, there are certain institutions that should be consulted even before doing it. The Federal Executive Council is supposed to know. The executives or managing director, or the managing directors of these commercial banks should know.
Active citizen. You're saying about the consultation, CBN ought to consult this concern.
Yes.
But in the true sense of it, we all know that the plan or the mindset of the presidency at that time was to prevent vote buying. That was primarily the reason why that short time frame was given, and at that time it was set. Yes, vote buying was actually reduced to the barest minimum in the just completed presidential election. Will you not be telling the governors, 3 of them that started it and the 16 of them that ended getting the judgment, to say that they are more like the Robin Hood to the Nigerian citizens? Because now the cash crunch we were experiencing, now with the availability that the Supreme Court, you understand, has now said, okay, fine, both new currency and the old one should be in circulation. Now my question is, what is the adverse effect on the economy of Nigeria? One, would Nigerians trust the presidency, the CBN with any other money policy in the nearest future? Election is coming up by Saturday. With this issue now, are we going to see a repeat of what the presidency was trying to fight? Please, let me have your thoughts on this.
Thank you very much. Yes, wanting to fight vote buying, you know, I imagine when it has become, you know, using you know, cash, you know, limiting cash in circulation, when it has become a policy of not, you know, to stop vote buying. Be that as it may, it might be the intention of maybe both the federal government and the CBN, because I don't know the relationship between CBN and vote buying and vote, whichever way. It's not part of CBN's anything. That one was the president talking about it. It shouldn't be part of what we're talking about, because anybody that hears it, you know, or any developed nation or civilized group, to hear that we are in a cash mess because we want to stop vote buying, it wouldn't sound civilized. Again, now that the president has done something like that, if it is actually what he had in mind, what happens? Election was actually conducted, and unexpectedly the result was announced. So did he say, when many people were saying don't announce result, the highest person that you know that was getting the votes had about 10 or 12 states. The second person was about 10 states, or the 2 other people, runner-ups, were about 10 states. Was that enough to declare results? And they went and declared the results. You know, so if he was using cash squeeze to stop vote buying, why didn't he use it to stop the declaration of the result? Because the result that they declared wasn't ripe. Nobody at that point, from any layman's view, should be declared winner of the Nigerian election. But the president went to do that.
The president or the INEC chairman?
The INEC chairman, yes. The INEC chairman. So actually, what the court did is what they should do. When there is a problem in the land, no matter the situation, once the Supreme Court comes in, they are the final arbiter. This one we're saying, whether they have jurisdiction, they don't have jurisdiction, in all, in all matters that is affecting the citizens of the country, the Supreme Court has jurisdiction over them.
So it means that the president was wrong when the matter was taken to the court and he came out to address the nation.
Remember, I said it in this studio, that the president overruled the Supreme Court, which is tyranny. He said that it was a tyrant move, and I am so happy that the Supreme Court used the same word, tyrant. When they were reading the address, they used the word that the president behaved in a tyrant way. He's never supposed to overrule the Supreme Court. And that is why we're having the problem we're having today. Because if the president had allowed the Supreme Court to do their thing, because they have given a date by, I think, last Friday or so, to give judgment, the president could have allowed them. By the time they give judgment, you know, if there is anything he will do or say with them, he can do that, but he doesn't have the right over Supreme Court. So that is why, and if you see what we have suffered, any sensible president or central bank governor that saw what we passed within the 1 week of this policy, 2 weeks and 1 month, supposed to do a very good readjustment. Because we started doing trade by barter in Nigeria. If you have rice and you go to the market, you begin to ask the Gari person because you don't have the money. The person that is selling Gari doesn't have the money. So people started negotiating. It happened in this country, trade by barter. We were reading in economic books those years back.
We have an economics, right? Okay, quickly, let's come to you now. So, I mean, it's now an issue of when three elephants are fighting. The grass, I mean, Nigerians, we are the grass, we are the ones suffering because it's now between the Supreme Court, the presidency, and the CBN. But then again, since this money crunch, the scarcity of Naira note, a whole lot of people like me, I know all of us here, we started using e-channels for our payments and all that. But just yesterday, we had the news that one of the fintech company was hacked yesterday, Flutterwave to be precise, was hacked yesterday. So, and about 2.9 billion Naira was taken away from their account. So where do we even go from here? Are we ready for e-transactions in our country? I mean, some people will tell you that the policy is okay, that it will aid e-transaction. People will start doing businesses without handling and moving around with cash. But what about people in the hinterlands? What about the rural dwellers? Are we really ready for this now? If we are not ready, what do we need to do to strengthen our technological, apparatus and see that all those things, we get it right?
Well, we learn every day, though we learn the hard way. We choose to learn the hard way in this country. For me, I still believe it is a process and an implementation challenge of the central bank, and not necessarily on the merits of the currency swap, minus the political side. Like the point I was trying to drive at, I will still come to your question. The point I was trying to drive at earlier was that nobody is saying that the Supreme Court does not have the right to entertain cases on the rest of them as the final arbiter, the Oga Pata Pata of them all. But the issue now is this. Because this issue has made me to do some research, to read up on the law surrounding the operation of these courts and the monetary policy regulation. And you find out that nobody is saying that the case cannot go to the Supreme Court. But the issue now is that the state governors who went directly to the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court you can go directly to the Supreme Court to entertain matters between, for instance, the states versus states versus the federal government. But what we are saying now is this: the states have an issue with the CBN policy and not the federal government. The CBN is an agency, or you can call it an agency or a parastatal or a ministry or a department of government, but not the federal government itself. So if you have a case with this kind of institutions, you will first of all go and start from the High Court and work your way up, that is with the CBN directly and not necessarily the federal government. Though the federal government will be joined in the suit, but the main actors there now will be the CBN and the state governors. But coming under the guise, they know that they have to follow that process. They're coming under the guise that they want to, that is a federal government policy. That is wrong, as far as I'm concerned. It's wrong because they have a case with the central bank, not the federal government. So they're supposed to go to the court, but they know that because of the political season, that if they follow that channel, that by the time they will get up to the Supreme Court level, election are go. So it's not as if, that they feel the concern, the plight of the masses. Where was this their plight when people were on strike for 8 months? Where was this their concern when we were having one security challenge or the other? Where was this their plight when we've been experiencing fuel scarcity? For how long? The states did not remember that, no, their people are suffering. They did not. So I want us to understand where I'm driving at. So I'm not saying that but going under the guise that it is a federal government policy. No, it is a CBN policy, so they should go through the normal route. But now that they have done so, what I'm saying is that the process of going to court, I felt it was not the proper channel. And the central bank itself had some implementation challenges. Like you rightly pointed out, within the fintech space, I know when this policy was at its infancy, we were here now, myself, yourself, Chief, we were here. And one of the things I raised then was that in this consultation, that they should also, try and reach out to not just the commercial banks, but most of all these fintech companies that, provide these financial services. Because it has moved, banking now has moved beyond the traditional banking we know to these fintech financial service providers. So now, we called on this, because the central bank is supposed to have anticipated that, look, if you are telling people to migrate to all these alternative payment platforms, that those people were supposed to go and strengthen their what will I call it now? Their technology, their background, their everything about what they operate with, to cope with what is going on, because people, the kind of a surge they will experience will be unprecedented. It's just like what INEC was saying, that, okay, you anticipated to use IREF, then all of a sudden you did not know that you will be overwhelmed by the usage and the rest. No, you're supposed to anticipate something like that. So it's not when you know. So the fintech guys, I feel that maybe they were not really up to speed with what the central bank had in mind, and even commercial banks, to the extent that today, some deposit money banks, now as we call them now, are having problems with their payment. These are technological payment platforms. Some of them, their apps don't work for a while. I don't want to mention them, but there are some that have become very popular, in bad light, as far as these things are concerned, because they cannot cope with what people, the pressure that will come on their platform when people migrate there. So you must have done your homework comprehensively to make sure that these things, when people just migrate to this payment platform, you're telling them to use digital Naira and so on and so forth, that the transition will be seamless, that you will not start having issue of network or security threats, because they know that the security threat will come. INEC is saying that their server was, there were over 20 attempts to hack their server. They 120, I don't know which one is which. So you expect that while you are preparing for this spike in the usage, you also know that more money will be mobilized in that platform, and you need to strengthen your security, which many of them now will now begin, I believe, will begin to start doing.
But CBN really talked about this by sensitizing people. In fact, they went on programs. I was opportune to have watched one of those programs when they were telling us the impact they will make to make sure this money goes down to the grassroots. As far as even giving money to microfinance banks. But I'm sure if any person operates a microfinance bank, I'm sure you will definitely go there and your ATM is
going to microfinance bank is even below.
It's because they said they wanted to hit the hinterland.
The central bank had a policy. I mentioned it that time, that the central bank had a policy of taking cash directly to rural areas, directly to individuals. When they come, they set up shop. Then, people in the villages, they will tell them, bring your cash.
They did that there was Kaduna.
Yeah, not only Kaduna, most of the northern states. Remember, I made mention of that in that. What is happening is our own Nigeria different? That you had it, the implementation, in most parts of the country, especially on the other side. And you see CBN officials moving with cash to the villages. And people were told to bring their cash, and they were given a limit. 10,000. Then when it exceeds 10,000, the bank official will now use his or her discretion to now, decide whether to allocate or not. So the central bank, yes, made certain moves, like you pointed out, in terms of enlightenment, in terms of engagement, but it is the implementation process. How do you explain the fact that you give banks money? Because somewhere along the line, videos started trending where you see CBN officials going to banks, and within their vaults, you see where they stash these new notes and the rest of them. And how, people cannot get it on the streets, but these monies were stashed somewhere. You will go to parties and you will see these new notes being, flaunted everywhere, but the individuals cannot get this money. So it means that somewhere along the line, those in the banking system, when I mean bank, from the central bank down to commercial banks, were part of the saboteurs of this policy that made it not to work. So you do not go to court to go and address issues like that. It is when you have a system that is properly organized and properly supervised. You have the political will. You don't use the court process to determine political will. And again, the the Supreme Court is a policy court. In as much as it is the final everything, the last bus stop, it is a policy court. Being a policy court, I felt that it should have told that direction of policy, advice by telling the central bank and saying, okay, can you go and, find a way of, revisiting this policy, know how you can, if there is need for extension, you can extend, as an advice. Advice. So that you do not seem to be undermining the powers and the independence of the central bank in public. It can, the Supreme Court can do that. Instead of coming to say, no, in fact, you called it null and void on the one hand, and on the other hand, you are extending the deadline of a policy that is supposedly null and void to December. So how do you reconcile that?
Okay, so it seems both of you are having a conflicting opinion when it comes to the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court and then that of the CBN. Ichie, when you spoke earlier, you said that the Supreme Court has a right to do whatever it is that they are doing now.
I you don't have a right to. Yeah, but I said the channel with which the state governors approached the Supreme Court was not the proper route. Okay. I'm still in agreement, but the only thing is the channel. Okay. Yes, they know what they had in mind to do, and that's why they went that way.
All right, quickly. Okay, you want to add something to that? Okay, go ahead.
I wanted to say that the central bank is not an advisory body. It's a court. When you bring a matter...
You mean Supreme Court?
The Supreme Court, sorry. The Supreme Court, yes. It's not an advisory body. It's a court. When you bring a matter to them, they look at it on its merit, and give judgment. I think that is their major function.
As a chief, you know that. And again, sorry, I'm interjecting a bit. You know that, like what I said.
If you look it up, you see that the central bank, the Supreme Court is a policy court, and you know that what made them not to deliver judgment initially? They said the two of you want to use me as scapegoats. Yes, when the case was something before, I think some days before the election. They declined, coming into the matter. You see, that's the Supreme Court. That's why I said, in some instances, it's not every time you give a judgment. You can tell these people, go and look at these things yourself.
So
it's not, yes, you start taking sides. That's why I'm saying that by taking the right, or by making that pronouncement, it is undermining the powers of the central bank.
The Supreme Court has spoken. We've not heard from the president. We've not heard from the central bank governor.
Does it mean that everything is okay, as in based on the fact that the Supreme Court has spoken?
What? That's a question for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now that Supreme Court has spoken, they have given its judgment to.
Yes.
What they have given judgment, and everybody is bound to obey. Unless we want to have a very serious crisis in the country. When the Supreme Court says, do this, if the central bank refuses to do it, the central bank will be charged with contempt of court. And once they are charged with contempt of court, MFL, the CBN governor will be arrested. So they have given their judgment. So what the CBN is supposed to do now is to come back and meet these the relevant bodies, Federal Executive Council, the NEC, these managing directors of commercial banks and these other financial houses. They have to, sit down, work together, and say, now that the Supreme Court has done this, how do we move? And the way, the way to move will be there, because what the CBN did was, I would say, it was a kind of maybe it might not be deliberate, but the planning was not sufficient. They didn't get enough data on what they were doing, and they did it, and it didn't work. For instance now, most of these commercial banks, some people say, sabotaged, and so on. It wasn't any commercial bank sabotaging anybody. Money was not printed in their large numbers that will be enough for the Nigerian citizens. There was so much, the cash was so small, the money printed was so small that the central bank was building on e-transaction. The central bank was saying, go and you do e-business, do transfer, and but
there was still
a ceiling they gave to even transactions through the internet.
And that one was one of the another big issue. Now that the ceiling was there, commercial banks were not giving out money over the counter.
Yeah.
People were doing
commercial banks were not giving over the counter, and you want to go and withdraw either through the POS
and
they will not tell you there's a limit. There's a limit. You can withdraw.
If you pick 10,000 or 5,000, they say if you want to do another one, say you have exceeded the limit. So you see people walking around going to buy money. People were buying money in Nigeria. Even as of today, as I'm talking to you, people are still buying money. So it was as bad as that. It was the CBN that sabotaged its policy. Because the money was not given to the commercial banks enough to make sure they satisfy their customers. I have said it before.
Maybe because the reason they give for this redesign is for them to mop up the excess cash that is outside their vote, and for them to now print so much again. Don't you think that it will make people then people will still store it back, store it in their own votes?
That is why we said the consultation will help you. And when the CBN was doing it, that is why we said, tell us what you are doing. Let us work with you. Even if you don't talk to the public and tell the public this is what it is, there are other relevant financial institutions that must know what you are doing, that will advise you properly. Some of the managing directors of some of these banks are experts in banking. So if the CBN has consulted, firmly, enough, they won't have any problem. Because you won't bang on the issue of saying you want to do cashless and you starve the whole country of cash. Not one, not two. In their millions, people who don't have cash again to use. So it was as bad as that.
Economist is itching to say
so go ahead.
Because I saw when you were going to his
finger. We were raising your hand.
No, the thing is, no, I didn't want to interrupt.
Yes, go ahead.
The conversation. The thing is,
one of the policies, like you pointed out, is that you do not expect, the CBN has been hammering on this ab initio, that expect them to withdraw, for instance, from the economy and in mind. So they knew that, yes, they diverting people to this or these digital channels, that if the cash you have is not there. And but the problem is, Nigeria is we still have a very large informal sector, and most of the things that run in the informal are still cash based, cash dependent. So it wasn't a policy that was supposed to happen overnight. This is something that with time we will get used to.
Good.
Good. So, but the thing is that the pain was too much for people to bear. So that was where the central bank could have devised other means, to try to ameliorate this suffering, so that we don't, in trying to achieve short-term goals, jeopardize the long-term vision of what the central bank is trying to do. Yes, what we find in the country is not what is prevalent in developed societies. In some countries, even in the US, in the UK, all these other countries, even in the EU, there are some places where if you want to spend $100 in dollars in terms of the higher denominations, they will first of all do a background check on you before they accept it. It's not as if those, yes, there's the volume of transaction you may want to, transact. When you come with it in terms of cash, it's not as if they will not accept it, but they will want to do some background checks. Why is this guy not using the channel? Is he trying to cover his tracks or something? So it's not as if they don't use cash. But the thing is, we need to be seen to be moving in that direction. We are not supposed to be, moving around with huge sums of money and the rest of them. So it is something that, like I said, they are supposed to develop other avenues that will help to cushion the effect of this policy. But whether the policy is good, the policy is good. We should not be a cash-dependent society. But another problem we have again, I want to say, is that the central bank brought this crisis upon itself. And the chief architect is the governor of the central bank. You are supposed to be seen as independent. I want to give you an example. When Sanusi was the CBN governor, and he came up with this Islamic finance, Islamic banking policy. You know the way people fought, churches, everybody that is trying to Islamize the country. No, the central bank stood his ground. And the guy came out and was even trying to defending the policy to the point where he was saying them, okay, look at the central bank board of governors, deputy governors, and the rest, the monetary policy committee, trying to check the ratio of Christians to Muslims on there. And you found out that the Christians far outweigh the Muslims. And, try to be objective and say, look, this is not even about a religion. It's not a religion issue or stuff. That in fact he inherited it from the policy of the previous central bank governor. That he's just coming to implement what he saw. And after all the noise, the policy went through based on his merits, because you could not find anything to link the central bank governor to that policy. But in this case, where the central bank governor ab initio made a miscalculated and unfortunate attempt to enter into the political space, the political arena, to contest primary in a political party, and even went as far as seeking judicial interpretation whether he is a public servant or a civil servant, whether he's supposed to relinquish his chair before he does that, and all those things. So that has already cast doubt on the credibility and the integrity of the central bank, such that any policy that comes out of the bank, they will always have a political spin to it. People always say, after all, the governor he's a politician, he belongs to this part, he has procured branded buses and stuff like that. So you see that damage, that move, something that I don't think we will be able to remedy, because it's necessary political attention to the central bank. The central bank is supposed to be neutral, or seen to be neutral in terms of these issues. But when you have somebody still sitting on that, look, in civilized society, by now that guy would have honorably resigned, because even the way the president-elect for now, pending the outcome of the same court, the president-elect has been hammering that this policies is targeted at him. How do you think the relationship between himself and the central bank governor will be, when there are some provisions where in the Central Bank Act that before the central bank takes a decision, it needs the presidential approval? How do you think what do you think will be the relationship when this same CBN governor meets this incoming president that has this opinion about the central bank? How do you think that relationship will be like?
Okay, just quickly before we go, because we really don't have time again. No verse, I beg, no verse. I mean, if eventually the CBN bows to pressure, of course they've been pressurized by a lot of groups, Serap, I mean, to the directive of the Supreme Court. Now, don't you think that December 31st is too long a time for us to, be using this old and new Naira notes? I mean, using them at the same time.
Thank you very much. Yes. It's not what the central bank does. The central bank, those judges, they are the Supreme Court, they are Nigerians. and they came from different backgrounds. So they know what the country, the people are passing through. That is why the extension. If you understand Nigeria, more than 70% of Nigerians are unbanked, are illiterates. Even when they are touching phone, they don't know what they are doing. I want to tell you the truth. So 31st December is a good period, you know, at least taking almost 9 months. Taking almost 9 months. By the time we do this 9 months and come out of it, you see that the thing will be a bit seamless. It will flow. And nobody will know when we move from this, this program to the other one. But if you say it is only 100 days, it is 31st March, everybody ends. That is why we are suffering what we are suffering today. And it is becoming even more difficult now that there was, sorry, to give just 2 seconds. Somebody wanted to come back from Lagos to Anambra here. The person has booked the business, transaction. But he said he had only 2,000 Naira in his pocket. And he said, if I came to Anambra and if I land at the airport, what am I going to do with these taxi drivers? And he said, I can't go further.
No, you can still do transfer.
He said, supposing he does transfer, okay, and if the thing didn't work, is he going to use his leg to come back? so it was
do like some exercise. Of course, this is hitting that
December is okay. It's okay. And I will advise the central bank, there's no need, you know, making issues where there is no issue. Just quietly, because the central bank is talking about Nigerians. The CBN, you are talking about Nigerians. And the Nigerians chose the 31st. We feel we should, I said we feel.
Okay.
Because the central bank has spoken.
Because we didn't conduct any public hearing.
Almost the central bank has, the Supreme Court has spoken the minds of millions of Nigerians because everybody is suffering. Well, yes.
We just need to keep our fingers crossed because we don't even have the new Naira note or the old Naira note in circulation.
Yes.
So even if we are going to use them, the CBN will reintroduce them back into the system
because they have been ordered to reintroduce it.
Well, on that note, we want to say a very big thank you to both of you for joining us this morning. Thank you so much, Chukwunonso Ekesiobi from Department of Economics. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
And also to you, Ichie Michael Dumodu, that active citizen, right? Thank you so much for being here this morning.
Thank you.
All right.
We must save Nigeria from collapse.
Ajun we say it's been a pleasure having you guys with us here today.
Well, definitely tomorrow we'll do it again.